Well, hello, it's your Boothby Soldier in Psychology. And something that I haven't talked about for a really long time is recovery culture, relapse prevention plans. Why do I do the things that I don't want to do? And why do I enjoy doing them or think I do until I don't? So one of the basic theories of compulsive behaviors is the cycle of negative behavior or maladaptive behavior or addiction, whatever we want to call it. The cycle of the thing that I keep doing that I don't want to do, whatever it might be. So, of course, when we think of compulsive behaviors, there's some pretty typical things that come to mind: misuse of substances, misuse of money, misuse of shopping, misuse of food. What else? Oh, misuse of harming ourselves in different ways. There's all sorts of typical compulsive behaviors. And then there are our more personal compulsive behaviors, patterns of automatic behavior. And to some degree, we all have some compulsive behaviors. And I think too, if you're like me, who has a very busy brain and you audit your own life, you might be able to look back on different periods of times where you struggled with different compulsive behaviors, maybe some in painful ways and maybe some in less painful ways. In recovery culture, this is where we talk about non-functioning and functioning addiction. So sometimes compulsive behaviors are actually quite functioning. They don't cause us a lot of harm. They're not necessarily seen by others. They don't, they're not doing detriment to our lives. And so we can just function with them. There's not the massive rock bottom that the more maladaptive negative behaviors might draw us to. So anyhow, cycle of addiction, cycle of maladaptive behaviors, compulsive behaviors. What is this? I love this model. I'm not going to throw a picture up. I'm just going to talk about it. You can find all sorts of pictures on the internet if you want. But basically what happens is, there's so many different ways to land in this. In our brain, we have all these neural pathways. So something happens that feels familiar and our brain sets off. Information comes in, it hits our emotion center, it goes off into our thinking center. But really, what we're talking about is a trigger. So, trigger is kind of one of those psychobabble pop psych words that you either love it or you hate it. But trigger is an important word, especially in the context of this conversation. A trigger might just mean something that gets my uncomfortable feelings or good feelings. I just start feeling when the trigger happens. I see something, I hear something, I feel something. I sense into something and emotions are stirred, or perceptions. So my emotions or my thinking. This is really cognitive behavioral, which is not necessarily something I usually talk through, but it's genius for compulsive behaviors. So I'm triggered, I have thoughts and feelings, and then if I don't find a way to stop myself and think and feel with those thoughts and feelings, I can head into my rituals. So my rituals are like autopilot. And it's interesting when we pay attention to our own compulsive behaviors. Rituals can be quite subtle, or they can be very pronounced. If you're actually going to write down this on a piece of paper and you start to think, well, what is the sort of like slippery slope into my automatic way of getting to the negative behavior? We got to remember that our neural pathways, the more powerful they are, they're not little dirt roads in our brain. Eventually they're highways and then superhighways. So the superhighway wants to carry us to the exact place that our biology is trying to get to, because that biology is going to give us something like a dopamine hit. So our brain is just doing a thing. I call it lazy brain. It's why withdrawal gets us into trouble, because our brain is lazy and it's trying to get us going into our cycles. So we have a thought and a feeling because of the trigger. We head into the rituals, which could be as simple as I'm exhausted from the day. I think this is endless because it's Wednesday. And I start thinking about whatever, having something at home, a bowl of ice cream, or something else. Just, I don't want to trigger anybody because we're talking about triggers, but I start leaning into what would really be great. I'm already in my autopilot. It's slowly sinking in. And then, the walk to the car even can be part of autopilot, the leading into driving, the ruminating thoughts, the driving past, maybe ice cream stores or things like this, until finally I decide to pick up some ice cream and take it home, and I get into my more acute rituals. And then the thing happens. I eat the ice cream. We indulge in the compulsive behavior, whatever that might be. I mean, ice cream is a great example. If that was a habit, something that is habitualistic inside of us, it's something that I repeat often, then that could be a compulsive behavior. It's just not as maladaptive as some, although I might gain weight, although I might, not feel great, although I could have cavities or something like that. It's just not going to cause me as much harm as something else could. So we do the thing we don't want to do. And then, of course, we have consequences. Now, the thing with the cycle is, so again, there's a trigger, there's thoughts and feelings. I head into my rituals, my autopilot. I do the thing. I use whatever it is that I am using to self-medicate. So the use is self-medication, regardless of what that use might be. It's deeply personal. Regardless of the maladaptiveness, the level of harm it's going to cause me, I self-medicate. And then there's a consequence. And the consequence is always something of the demoralization crisis. I further intensify discomfort with the emotions that led me to this, the good or bad feelings that I'm uncomfortable with. It's an important thing to think about. It's kind of confusing, but we can be uncomfortable with joy just as much as we can be uncomfortable with despair. And in the consequence, I ruminate on my negative beliefs about myself and others, the world around me. So whatever those maladaptive thoughts are that the trigger hit, in my demoralization crisis, can then reinforce those negative beliefs, which just gives more power to the cycle of the compulsive behaviors. So once something happens, I see, I hear, I feel, I sense into something that is uncomfortable for my internal working model, and I feel a feeling that is uncomfortable for me. I think a thought that I'm not being mindful to talk myself through. I'm not talking through my thoughts or feelings, and then I head into autopilot and I self-medicate, however that might be, and then I lead back into the consequences. And so it goes again. A cycle of compulsive behaviors unfolding. Now, it's important to know, it's very interesting, and if nothing else, just to notice. Okay, so here's this theory. When I was a clinical addictions counselor, I might get people to write this down and to consider what are the events, those things that I see, hear, feel, sense into, that are getting my feelings going and my thoughts going in a way that causes me distress that I'm not aware of. And being more aware of that, because that's where we really want to stop the cycle. However, we also want to know what the cycle is. So I want to know what my automatic behaviors are when I am in my default behavior. So if you've read my book, I talk about defaults, those things, and they don't always cause us harm, right? The cycle isn't always causing you harm. My cycles don't always cause me harm that I know of. But the self-medicating is a really interesting thing. I'll do another piece on self-medication. Because it's something that we can underrate and understand. But self-medication is nuanced and complicated, and it's important. So we do the thing that is actually misleading us to think that we are getting help, because inside we have a chemical reaction that gives us some relief for a period of time. But once that false relief is gone, then the consequence shows up. And the consequence reinforces the cycle. All right. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope that you're doing amazing. And I'm glad that people are taking time to think about their internal working model, their psyche, their relationships with others, and with God. Those are things that I'm quite passionate about. Peace and love.